how do you like come up with ideas for the types of posts? You've got your weekly schedule, you're going to do this on this day. I assume it's a lot of testing and learning, like for people who are trying to get started.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
Yeah. So, funny enough, this is not planned. That's exactly what this week's newsletter is all about. I just finished writing it last night, because I'm going in kind of a flow. So the flow you're asking is this flow, like this 4-part series that I'm working on. And so by the time this, maybe drop in the show links if people want to check it out, to see it
We
in
will
depth. But
definitely promote it.
the way I think about it is like everybody has highly valuable, highly specialized knowledge in their head right now. There's multiple ways you can call it. I call it niche knowledge, right? You've heard of niching down, find your niche. So I'm not trying to be like the most unique human being in the world, but I think niche knowledge is like how I tell people how you can, create content and build an audience. So what I mean is there's like, I hang out with like SDRs and like entry level folks sometimes, right? And they're like, oh, like I'm not an expert. I've only been in the game, the sales game for 2 months. What do I have to share? Well, let's look back, and I use a 2-part framework. Super simple. I love fill in the blanks. You have your skill statements. I know how to interview at a B2B company. Or you have your outcome statements. I know how to land a B2B job. Within that, you have a bunch of information that you can break down, right? So you could say, insight. What did you learn along the way? I learned that interviewing has nothing to do with X. It has everything to do with Y. Great. There you go. What about a guide? What was the exact steps you took to prep for that interview? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Share that, right? What perspective has changed? I used to think this, right? I think it's kind of similar to insight, but you know what I mean? What did I learn? What would I now view as different? And there's a couple other ones as well that I use. So I say, write a huge list of all your skill statements and your outcome statements. And there's tons, there's dozens, if not hundreds. Write all that out. Okay, now look at the buckets that naturally form. For me, B2B content strategy, high level, what, why frameworks. Number 2, sales tactics. Used to be a sales rep. I know how to get deals closed. I can teach people that as well. Third one is content tips, how to write, how to create a webinar, stuff like that. So I have like these 3 buckets. Then you just align it to your audience. Who cares about these 3 things? For me, B2B content creators, pretty straightforward, right? So if you follow that process, and I'll pause here in a second, you actually have tons to talk about. You're actually very credible. We just often think you need 10,000 hours of experience, because Malcolm Gladwell, I think, or I need to be a VP at a company before people will listen to me. But I've seen people create great content and build a really fast following simply by sharing their journey entering B2B, or, hey, it's my first time as a VP, or, hey, I'm just learning how to launch a podcast. Come along and join the journey. Here's what I'm learning.
So I love the framework, and then really the sharing the journey bit that you mentioned there at the end, because I think so many people, to your point, think that, who am I? I really don't have an interesting enough POV to share in public. And it's really not the case. Like, we all started somewhere, and people sit on way more like ideas and content and just perspective than I
Yeah,
think they realize at first. And they just got to get over that initial hump.
dude, absolutely. There's this concept called L7 from I'm dropping the name. It's the guy who wrote The Big Short.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm going to remember the name like 10 minutes after we're done recording. That's how
We
my
will
brain
too,
works.
and that's driving me crazy that I didn't plan on referencing it, but it came up. Hopefully I remember it. It's going to drive me absolutely crazy. He's very famous. He's one of my favorite authors. I'm getting stage fright. So his recent podcast, Michael Lewis, boom. Michael Lewis has a podcast called Against the Rules, and this season he talked about experts and expertise. And he said that what they found was in a big organization, L7s or level 7s are the people who have the deepest expertise, but they're often the furthest away from the CEO. So think of it, CEO, VPs, directors,
Interesting.
all the way down to like SDRs, entry level specialist managers. They actually have some of the most specialized, valuable knowledge to the company because, I don't know, when a website crashes or if, a phishing PH incident happens, CEO doesn't know what to do. VPs hardly know what to do. Directors in big companies haven't touched, the work in years. So they go down to these people and go, hey, how do we solve this problem? What do we do? And those people actually have some of the most valuable information. And so that was kind of part of like this framework as I was building it. I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And it also empowers the majority of people because there's only one CEO at a company. There's only a handful of VPs, but there's so many people at these L7s or L6s that have a ton of information.